Hey, welcome to Theology Proper 102. We're going to use this 5-minute video to look back at what we talked about last October when we did Theology Proper 101. And Theology Proper is the term that theologians give to the study of God, His character, His attributes, His nature. The 3 sessions that we went over last time were kind of 3 contrasts that we think of when we're talking about God. And the first way that we find one of those contrasts is when we think about God's communicable attributes and His incommunicable attributes. Communicable attributes are things that God, making us in His image, communicated to us, allowed us to be able to share in. His incommunicable attributes are those that are just completely other than us. God in His holiness is always different from us, either in the nature of the attributes or the degree to which He possesses these attributes. But in God's incommunicable attributes, those that He doesn't share with us, we're thinking of things like His capacity to be everywhere at once, or to be outside of time. The fact that God is self-sufficient, that He's eternal. All of these, and in some ways they can be communicated through what have sometimes been called the omnis, omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent. Those kinds of attributes, those are just things we don't share with God. But His communicable attributes are those that can in some ways be replicated in those who bear His image. But obviously never to the same extent or to the same degree. We kind of partially imitate God in these ways. So He is loving. He is righteous. He is jealous. A lot of these kinds of attributes of God are ones that we, more and more over time, being redeemed into the image of Jesus, we can share these in a little bit more of a sanctified way. In the second session, last October, we talked about the tension between the fact that God is sovereign and that God is Father. When we say that God's sovereign, what we mean is that the creative God has exclusive reign over all of His subjects. But when we think of God as our Father, we're talking about God personally, not just broadly over all of creation, but personally for those He's adopted, has intense love for us as His children. And the sovereignty of God is one that we're going to talk about a little bit more in our breakout session here in Theology Proper 102. And there's also going to be a couple of Bible studies that are related to that one. But when we're thinking of God as sovereign, what we need to keep in mind is God having made everything, and because of His nature as the only one to rule and reign over all of creation, He can do whatever He wants. And that should terrify those of us who recognize that we are not holy. We have fallen short of God's standard. To use terms that Jesus used, He said, if you then, though you are evil, it doesn't mean as evil as we possibly could be, but certainly in comparison to God, we don't measure up. So what would the sovereign God do? Well, to those that He sovereignly has chosen to be His own, we have the amazing privilege of knowing God as a Father. So that was part of our second session. The third session last time dealt with God's nature in a very perplexing way, and this also set us up for a study in November as well. But we talked about God's unity and God as Trinity. So God is one and God is three. So that what we see is there's only one God who is worthy of our worship. And anything that we give our worship to, anything that we ascribe as supreme, is a rival to God if we're not counting Him as the only one worthy of our worship. So there's no division between His characteristics, no division in His essence. But God is also three. That within the one nature of God, we have 3 persons: Father, Son, and Spirit. So if you want to go back and think a little bit more about that, you could go to the third session from last October. But that, in essence, in brief little format, is Theology Proper 101.